From West Rockhill, we have Greg Lippincott, Don Duval, and Jim Miller. From East Rockhill, we have Gary Bovolnik.
Yes.
Sorry, I had it earlier. Dave Nyman and Marianne Morano. I don't see any local elected officials in the room at the state level. Okay, and from DEP, like I said, I'm Virginia. We have a DEP attorney here, Brian Glass. Project officer, Lena Harper. Colin Wade, also from our HASCA program. Ragesh Patel at the end. He is the Environmental Cleanup Program Manager. Out in the hallway, you met Tim Cherry, who is one of the HASCA section supervisors, and Rose Wenchel signed you in. She's our local government liaison. Also seated up here, we have Romana, who is our stenographer here this evening. She's going to help transcribe everything except for the informal question and answer portion. The biggest thing about that is that the comments during the hearing portion will be transcribed so that they can become part of the record. I'm going to turn it over to Brian so that he can tell you a little bit more about that process.
Thanks, Virginia. As Virginia mentioned, I'm Brian Glass. I'm a lawyer for the department. And I'd like to briefly explain the purpose of tonight's hearing just to place it in its proper legal context. As you may know, in response to PFAS contamination at the Ridge Run HASCA site, the department's proposing tonight a response action under the Hazardous Sites Cleanup Act. When the department proposes a response action of this nature, the statute directs it to create an administrative record to support its decision, and an important part of that administrative record is your input. The statute affords a 90-day public comment period for the public to weigh in on the proposed response action, and the statute directs the department to conduct a public hearing to solicit comments on its response action during that period. That's the hearing we're having tonight. At the end of the public comment period, the department's going to issue a decision, and the statute directs the department to file a response to significant comments, criticisms, and new data submitted to during the public comment period. So in other words, the department will take your comments into consideration as it renders its decision. In closing, I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight and being a part of this important process. We really value your time and your input. And with that, I'm going to turn the program back over to Virginia. Thanks.
Thanks, Brian. After I say a few more words, Lena Harper is going to provide you a thorough overview of the investigation that DEP conducted, as well as our recommendations regarding drinking water in the area. Following that investigation presentation, we will have a somewhat brief question and answer period. Anyone can ask a question. After the question and answer, we're going to do a brief intermission, probably about 5 minutes. If you at that time decide that you want to provide comments for the record, you'll be able to go back out to Rose and sign in to do that. If you had previously signed up but maybe changed your mind because you received enough information, you can also go cross your name out. But regardless, whether you provide comments here this evening or you submit comments to the department in writing, those are considered with equal consideration, and you have until July 27th to submit August 31st to submit additional comments. I do want to make a quick mention that as we sit and we listen about PFCs and the investigation that DEP conducted here at Ridge Run, I ask you to keep in mind that whether you're hearing PFCs, PFAS, PFOA, a number of other alphabet soup acronyms, to remember that while they have been covered extensively in the media, they are at the center of conversations both at the state and at the federal level. There's been significant dialogue regarding the potential of setting a maximum contaminant level, different health standards, the discussion about blood testing. All of that, while it is important, is not the purpose of tonight's meeting and tonight's hearing. The purpose of tonight is specifically to talk about the investigation that's already been conducted and DEP's recommendations moving forward. I would like to remind everyone that the EPA is hosting a meeting at the end of July that is more focused on that broader conversation about health standards and blood testing. DEP is not conducting any blood testing because that's not under our jurisdiction or our authority. That is something strictly for a health-based agency such as the Pennsylvania Department of Health or a federal Department of Health. Should levels or standards be developed or implemented in the future, we would obviously reassess the situations as they currently are. But right now, because in the absence of those standards, we're doing what we can with this investigation and our recommendations at this time. So with that, I will turn it over to Lena.
So I have met and talked to many of you. I have been doing a lot of the sampling on this site. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lena Harper. I have been the HASCO project officer for this site for the past year or so. So I am going to be talking about the background of the site, kind of how it came to fruition, and the investigation so far and the results we have received from that investigation. We are then going to talk about the different response alternatives that the department has been considering to provide potable drinking water supply in the site area to those who have been affected by this contamination. And then, as Virginia said, we will then take any public comments on the record regarding our proposed response. That's not, the lighting isn't too good in here, but this is a map showing the site. That yellow circle is denoting the original 1 mile radius around the North Penn Water Authority wells that we were originally sampling in. After we had done some initial sampling, we did go back and revise our sampling area to go a little bit to the west based on what we found. So the Ridge Run PFAS site is an area of groundwater contamination that is contaminated with, we're going to call it PFAS for short. This is including PFOS and PFOA, which are both subsets of that bigger group of chemicals, PFAS. PFAS are chemicals that have been present in commercial, industrial, and residential products. This includes cookware, carpeting, clothing, food packaging, firefighting foams, and other water repellent materials. In May of 2016, the EPA set a health advisory limit of 70 parts per trillion for PFOA and PFOS combined in drinking water. In August of 2016, the North Penn Water Authority conducted voluntary sampling of their public supply wells. From that sampling, they found that 2 of their wells were contaminated with PFAS above that health advisory limit of 70 parts per trillion. Once this was discovered, DEP was notified, and also the North Penn Water Authority customers were notified, and the 2 affected wells were shut down, and the drinking water source was then rerouted from a different clean source. After that time, DEP met with the municipalities involved, which are East Rockhill and West Rockhill Township, also part of Percy Borough. And the department created our own website to cover the ongoing investigation, and the townships also created a section of their websites regarding this investigation. So from November 2016 to the present, DEP has been contacting residents and sampling private wells. So far we have sampled 156 separate private wells in the area. Right now we are providing bottled water to 9 residents above the health advisory limit for PFAS. This map is showing the results of our investigation so far. Just to give you kind of a idea of the area we're talking about, this is 3 Mile Run down here. This is Hill Road. This is Old Bethlehem Pike over here. So as you can see, the main area of concern is this area right here. This is Old Bethlehem Pike and Tabor Road intersecting it. So far we have found 12 wells that have been above 70 parts per trillion. We have also found 2 wells that we are continuing to monitor that are above 40 parts per trillion. And just as a note, The red dots here are any properties that have ever been above 70 parts per trillion. Some of those have fluctuated above and below, but for the purposes of this presentation, you can see in the overall investigation any property that has been above 70 parts per trillion. So our ongoing activity here is that we are providing bottled water for affected residents as a temporary measure while we continue our investigation period. As I said, there are 9 homes currently receiving bottled water. 3 homes have carbon filters right now. And we have been conducting ongoing multiple sampling results of any wells with any detection of PFAS above 40 parts per trillion. And during this entire period, we have also been analyzing our different response alternatives to evaluate which one would be the best option to provide clean residential drinking water in this case. The different evaluation criteria that the department uses in making our decision are, number 1, effectiveness. Does it mitigate the threats posed by this contamination? What is the time frame of the response? Is it temporary or permanent response, and how long will it reasonably take to put in place? Is it reliable? Can it consistently comply with the health-based standards, which in this case is the health advisory limit set by EPA? Is it implementable? Is it feasible to install, operate, and or maintain in this case? Is it cost prohibitive or is it cost effective, both for the department and for the homeowners who are affected by the contamination? And then also, we want to see what the public, municipal, and organizational support for our chosen remedy is. And as Virginia and Brian noted, this is done through receiving your public comments. So I'm going to go through these more in detail, but just to summarize the different response alternatives that we consider. Number 1 is no action, which is used basically as a baseline to compare the other alternatives against. Number 2 is the providing of bottled water with some restrictions on the use of groundwater. Number 3 is the installation of carbon filters with some restrictions on the use of groundwater. And lastly, the installation of a public water line, also with restrictions on the use of groundwater. So alternative number 1, which is no action, as I mentioned, this is just what we use as a baseline. The pros of this, there's really nothing to implement and no cost. The cons are obviously that it is not effective at providing clean drinking water. It is not a permanent solution. It is not reliably providing clean drinking water to those affected. Alternative number 2, bottled water with restrictions on the use of groundwater. The restrictions I will go over a little later more in detail, by the way. The pros of this are that it is easily implementable. It is effective at providing clean drinking water. All of the bottled water contractors that the department uses have tested their bottled water to make sure there is no PFAS in that bottled water either. It is a reliable source of clean drinking water, and it is relatively cost effective. The cons of this are that it is not really a permanent solution in the long term, and it is also inconvenient for homeowners to use and store all of that bottled water in the long term and on a regular basis. Alternative number 3, whole house carbon filters with restrictions on the use of groundwater. The pros of this are that it is fairly easily implementable. The carbon filter is just hooked up to whatever existing plumbing is in the house. It is relatively cost effective in this case. It is also effective, permanent, and reliable, and all of that is of course reliant on the system being properly maintained. The cons of this are that it is somewhat inconvenient. It requires ongoing monitoring and maintenance in order to be effective. Alternative number 4 is the public water line with restrictions on the use of groundwater. The pros of this are that it is an effective way of bringing people clean drinking water. It is a permanent remedy. Once it's in place, no one has to worry about drinking contaminated water. It is also reliable. The providers of the public water are held to drinking standards that they have to meet for their customers to make sure the water is clean. The cons of this are that it is inconvenient to the community during the construction. In this case, it is not cost-effective compared to the other alternatives, and also in this case, it is not very easily implementable. So the restrictions on the use of groundwater that I mentioned for alternatives 2 and 3, which are the bottled water or the carbon filters, we would have to put environmental covenants along with that. This is basically an agreement between DEP and the homeowner that documents that there is contamination in this well, but it is being properly mitigated by this proposed response. And in the event of the carbon filter, this would also outline the ongoing monitoring and maintenance requirements that are necessary to make sure that that is effective in the long term. This could also be removed from the property after demonstration of attainment that the drinking water levels are below the health standards. And if the DEP cannot, and the property owner cannot reach an agreement on this, the DEP does have the authority to issue an administrative order to put this in place. For alternative 4, the public water line, there would be a mandatory hookup ordinance enacted by the municipalities, and it would also require any property that is being hooked up to the water line to abandon their well. So this is a table that is basically summarizing the overall costs to DEP of the different response alternatives. As you can see, alternative number 1 is no cost. Alternative 2, the bottled water, we have summarized covering 1 year of bottled water and quarterly sampling for any homes that have had PFAS above the health advisory limit. Alternative 3, the carbon units, we have summarized the installation of the filters as well as 1 year of quarterly sampling and maintenance of those systems. For alternative 4, the public water line, this is based on an estimate of past projects we have done, basically just looking at the lateral feet, the number of connections, construction costs, things like that. So in this case, something that kind of makes this a bit of a challenge is that we have kind of very rocky terrain. It's not always, easily implementable to put the water line in here. And also another thing is that if only certain homes stop using their wells, this may affect the direction of the groundwater flow because those wells are no longer pumping. So in that case, we would want to extend the water line basically to the whole area to make sure no one is being affected by that plume if it shifts due to people turning their wells off. So this table is showing a comparison of the costs for the homeowners who would be undergoing this response. On the left, you can see the cost for a carbon filter. Here we are including 1 sampling event for PFAS and 1 filter change-out event. We also included just kind of a basic estimate of electricity costs to operate the well, just to make it even. On the right, you can see for the water line, this is basically also an estimate of what a typical monthly water bill would be, and then extended to a period of 3 years. And the reason we did 3 years is because we usually recommend the filter maintenance events are done every 3 to 5 years for the carbon filters. So that was basically a way for us to make sure that we were doing an equal comparison here. And this table is basically summarizing everything that we've talked about so far. As you can see, alternative number 3, the carbon filters, are hitting all of the criteria on our list so far. And the last criteria, of course, is the consideration of the public comments. Do we have public support for this proposed remedy as well? So the proposed remedy that we are presenting to you today is alternative 3, installation of whole house carbon filters on affected houses. This is protective of human health. It complies with the health advisory limit It is the most cost-effective permanent option in this case, and it is a permanent solution if it is maintained properly by the homeowner. The department
we're going to go into a somewhat brief question and answer period. Again, the purpose of tonight's meeting and hearing is not to discuss state or federal standards that have not yet been established, nor are we here to discuss things outside of DEP's purview or authority, such as blood testing, for example. We ask that the questions during the question and answer period, as well as the comments during the formal period, as much as you can and are willing to cooperate, that they are focused on our investigation and the proposed remedy that Lena has laid out for you in the carbon filters. After the question and answer, we're going to take a 5-minute intermission. Stretch your legs. If you hear something during the question and answer period or something during Lena's presentation, and you do want to provide that formal comment, please go visit Rose at the table when you signed in and write your name down. Similarly, if you did sign in and have changed your mind or want to go home and digest it all and submit it in writing, those comments are carried with equal weight, both written and spoken tonight. And also, if you get all the information you need and you don't feel that you need to stay for the hearing, that would be a good time to exit during that intermission. But when we come back from that, it'll be about 5 minutes. We will be on the record. The way that will work is I will just go in the order that you either called me in the past couple of weeks or that you signed in at the door, and we'll just go through the list. Everyone will have approximately 3 minutes. I haven't seen the list to know how many people are on it, and depending on what time we get to that portion, we can relax it a little bit. But, we'll get your comments and we'll say thank you. So if you have questions that you want answers to, do it during this question and answer portion, because once we are on the record, even if you are staring right at me asking me a question, I'm just going to stare right back at you because it's a comment that you're submitting. So with that, we will go off of the record now, and this is your time to ask any questions. Again, we have Lena, the project officer, who can talk in depth about the investigation and the proposed remedy. We have Brian, our attorney, who can talk more about the environmental covenants and any legal issues that you have. I can offer not as much as the technical experts, but a little bit about what we can and can't talk about based on a couple of different things. We have Colin, who's also a technical expert in the area, and Ragesh, who can provide some backup for that as well. So with that, I will help moderate and get your questions to the right folks up here. Sir, in the back?
Jim Miller, West Rockhill. After seeing it, I don't remember if you said this already, but after the first year, the carbon filter, the cost is back to the homeowner. What was the annual cost to the homeowner at that point per year?
So the question, just in case anyone, while Lena's pulling it up, is what is the annual cost to the homeowner?
So like I said, we have extended it to a period of 3 to 5 years, which is what we would normally suggest would be the time for the homeowner to sample and possibly change out the carbon filter. This could differ based on, the level of contamination, how much water the household uses. So this is really an estimate, but one sampling event for PFAS is $440 right now. And then a filter change out event on average is about $750. And this would not necessarily be an annual thing. It really depends on kind of the specific circumstances.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, in the red?
Hi, I'm Kelly Jameson, East Rockhill. I have a question about an email that went unanswered to EPA regarding whether or not they can test if the PFAS are in the sediment of our hot water tanks, in the pump boosters, things like that, because the carbon filters, I understand, are pretty good, but, the whole house, it could be coming in, and then it could still be in maybe the water softener or the sediment. So we never got an answer, so I'd just like to kind of put that out there in case anyone has thought about it or has any thoughts on that.
Okay, we did, thank you, Kelly. We saw your email today. Just for anyone in the room, I do like to make this disclaimer. We're not the EPA. I know that everyone probably knows that, but I feel obligated to remind everyone the EPA is obviously the federal agency, and we are the state. But I will turn it over about different sampling points. We've sampled at the well for drinking water, but the question is other sampling points such as water softeners and hot water tanks.
First of all, what we proposed to install the carbon filters. Is removed PFAS or anything else in your well, in the filters right there. So what goes in afterward, like hot water heater or softener, that'll be gone. So there won't be any PFAS going into your home,
I guess I'm not sure about that because our water heater is really old and we haven't replaced it yet. It's like 17 years old. So the water could come in, pick up some sediment. This is my question. I'm not a technical expert.
Again,
That's my concern. It's one of my concerns.
We can look at this sampling after the filter. We might do some study on that.
Okay.
And we may collect some extra samples to double check that that's not the case.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Just to summarize what Ragesh said, the carbon filters actually go on right when the water's entering the home.
Mm-hmm.
So any of the water softeners or hot water tanks, the water would already be filtered before they went to those other points in your home. So that, just to summarize what Ragesh said, this would be filtering right at that beginning point, as opposed.
What about the stuff that's already in there now? Before it's installed?
So this is a question about the water already in the home.
First of all, like PFC is a floater, it's not a sinker. So if the water is going through, it's not sticking to the pipes or anything. Not that we are aware of at this point. But again, the investigator will look into that further and get back to you on that. We might collect some extra samples. Yes.
This is just one cause of concern. I'm one of the people that live right next to Bergie's, whose well is completely contaminated, cancer survivor, you know, whatever. I feel that our property is just taking a total dip in value completely, and I think that they should take the best thing. I think we should have public water, period. Our cost is gonna be, you know, we didn't do anything about this fire to bring it on or whatever, but now we're taking all the inconvenience of bottled water, and not knowing this is gonna be 100% safe. It's gonna be something that we have to live with for the rest of our lives, as long as we're there. Can we even sell our home, you know, with this? I don't know, I just think that you need to look at what's totally best for us homeowners, instead of cost.
We want to make sure we capture that comment, and so if you could, when we open it up for public comment, you could state that again so it gets on the record.
I don't understand all this.
So this is the Q. So when we do open it up, the public hearing portion, just make sure you say that again.
Yeah, just in case anyone else has those questions, what we're doing right now is really to help clarify anything from Lena's presentation, really anything that will help inform your formal comment. You're certainly not obligated to make a comment, but we want to make sure that you have every answer that you need to help you form your comment if you are in support of the department's recommendation for these carbon filters, if you would rather see us do public water. That's really why we're here, to present the findings of that investigation and tell you that based on our analysis of everything that Lena outlined in terms of effectiveness and implementability, we are making the recommendation for carbon filters. That doesn't mean that it's a done deal. That's why we're here, and that last criteria for making a decision is coming to the public, giving you 90 days to review everything that we have, which is on our website in what's called the administrative record. And that's why you have until August 31st to make your comments to us regarding our proposed response. And that's why you can comment later during that formal portion or submit comments in writing, both of which carry equal weight with the department in their decision making. Try to go both sides. I was on this side, so throw in the yellow.
How long will this condition last?
The condition being
Condition contaminating the water.
the condition of the. So the question was, how long will groundwater contamination last?
At this point, we have no idea how long it's going to take. Educated guess would be 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, I don't know. We have similar contamination, not PFAS, but TC contamination, which we cleaned up not too far from here in about less than 10 years. I mean, meets the safe drinking water standards and everything with the carbon filters, because you're not just drinking the water, you're also implementing somewhat a smaller remedy at different locations. So it's cleaning up the water faster than just by providing the bottled water at this point, or public water at this point.
I will just add to that, there's still a lot of studies going on about PFCs. They are, well, we know that they've been in the environment for several decades. The more that we learn about them, because of their use not only in firefighting foam, but in food packaging, microwave popcorn bags, anything that's waterproof or stain-proof or fire-resistant. We do know that PFCs are very ubiquitous throughout the environment, which makes tracking them difficult. It makes just the across-the-board remediation of them difficult, because we're still learning about sources and how they're introduced into the environment. That's why the investigation started when we found these two wells. We're not finding them as ubiquitous as they seem to be from all of their sources. There doesn't seem to be a uniform level of PFCs in every well that we sample. That's why we have these pockets of investigations. We have one here, we have another one in Bucks County. There's obviously the larger one over towards the naval bases that EPA is the lead on. So as far as the groundwater contamination here in this area, it's hard for us to say, because we're still learning about these contaminants every single day. Oh, one follow-up and then I'll go to someone else.
Has this expanded since the original incident?
So the question is if the area has expanded since the original incident.
So that is something that we want to make sure we are looking into. So one thing we have been doing lately is we've been going back and trying to sample some of the houses that we sampled initially that were under, 40. Like I said, anything above 40 we have been sampling on a quarterly basis. But we are going back to sample some of those lower homes just to see if anything might be shifting since we started this investigation, a year and a half ago. That's certainly a possibility so far. Based on that, it does not look like it, but that's kind of an ongoing thing that we are working on as part of this investigation.
Sir, in the back?
Yes. I'm probably going to use all my 3 minutes, so.
Well, this isn't a time. This part is very informal.
Okay, so I got quite a few questions. I have some comments that probably could help everybody, okay? So that's why I'm here. Gary Volobnik from East Rockhill Township. I'm one of the supervisors. A couple of questions about the filter system that you showed us here tonight. If a resident, and I'm asking you this because I have residents asking me and I don't have the answer. The filtration system, carbon system that you're proposing here to install, whether I buy it myself or a resident buys it to put it in their home, do you have any idea what some of that costs?
I believe the cost of installation was somewhere around like $2,500.
For the total system installation cost is $2,500 roughly. Again, these are car shopping. Same thing with the filters. And those filters will cost roughly $700 to $800. Depends who the contractor is.
Okay. Is there a make and model of that system? Maybe I missed it. For our residents to know what make and model it is?
So there are several companies that make NSF certified filters. There's several companies that is independently certified by NSF to remove PFAS. So I know NSF has like a whole web page dedicated just to listing the different companies that make these NSF certified filters. Hopefully that answers that.
So, and there's another question I'm going to ask is a trick. I'm asking because I don't know, okay? And I want to make sure our residents, whether East Rockhill or West Rockhill, understand so that we all learn. So right now we have contaminants. Could you show the map of what you had up here, the circle, or where the spots, the color spots are, codes of what's contaminated, what's... So right there you said 12 homes, roughly 12 homes. I don't want to sit here and be picky, but... So your answer to what Mr. Duvall asked was, has it expanded? Your answer to that question is, it has not expanded? It has not moved? I didn't hear...
As far as we have seen so far, the plume itself, as we know it, has not expanded to new areas. We are continuously, having new wells that kind of pop up that we're sampling along the way. Okay. So it's kind of hard to answer that, but as far as we have seen, it has not, the plume itself has not been expanding or moving.
Okay.
And to go further on that, we are also installing some monitoring wells for the future studies.
Okay.
So we got to keep an eye on this. This is not the done deal.
Okay.
We want to respond to public health and take care of that first before going to the nth degree study on that.
Okay. Correct me when I'm wrong here. So back in 2016, it was North Penn Water Authority from Mike Capello, who was the original owner of the farm, that put the 200 homes up there. North Penn installed the water system. It's a public water system in the Ridge Run development that we're talking about. Everybody understand what I'm talking about? Or? Okay. So the 200 homes up there had public water from North Penn Water Authority. They found the contaminants in the water. Fair, correct me if I'm wrong. And we put in a switch line there from the authority with clean water. Fair? Correct? I'm correct. Okay. So there's a public water system right now up to Hill Road. Okay? So I'm going to help you out here. Over to Hill Road. Now there is a proposed approved development called the Pete McLennan development that has not started to be built. It's proposed 200 homes for public water, which reaches from Hill Road, the public system now, out to Park Avenue, Old Bethlehem Pike.
So this...
It goes from Hill Road to Old Bethlehem Pike is the proposed development. It's already been approved by East Rockhill Township. It's been approved on the board for I don't know how many years. I'm going to say 4 or 5 at least. I don't know where that is today. I don't have the answers exactly why it's not started, why whatever. But my idea is to expedite this, if possible, instead of supplying water, and I'm sure the residents are concerned about how this is going to expand. Nobody knows if it is going to expand. In my opinion, the right thing to do is run public water there. in that area. It's ASAP, like tomorrow. I'm being ridiculous. So smile, everybody smile. But what I'm saying is, instead of waiting 2, 3, 4 more years, maybe just possible if you work with the authority, these two gentlemen right here, these two guys. There is a drawing showing the proposed water system for the proposed development. If it ever goes forward, which was approved, it could be hooked from now that they have the water system in the Ridge 1 development into the, we call it the Pete McLennan property. It's a farm. It's 200 acres. It's right along 3 Mile Run.
Right here.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. It's all woods right now. It's a beautiful farm, but it comes right out to where the contaminated 12 homes are.
Right at Tabor
Right at
Road.
Tabor.
I mean off any public streets. All you'd have to do is cross Hill Road and run it across the
So the,
I mean,
I just
across
want
the-
to,
I'm sorry.
while we're on that point, the point that you're making about your opinion on the public water, that's definitely, we want to capture that. So we're not on the record right now, so either when we go back on the record, or you have until August 31st to make a comment. Everything that you just shared, I think, is very important. This proposed development and everything that you just said, if we can definitely capture that part on as a comment, again,
Okay.
either tonight or in writing before August 31st. And then I just want to give Lena a quick chance. I don't think that we really talked about it in the presentation, just to talk about the difference right now in the timelines of if we were to move forward with carbon filters, what that timeline looks for residents, and then if we were to move forward with public water, and this is all estimate, but a potential of what that timeline looks like. I don't want anyone confused that what Ragesh was saying about the groundwater contamination itself taking 10 years is not what we're looking at for a remedy. So I want to just make sure everyone has that bit of information. So if Lena, if you want to offer a few points on that.
Right.
And then we'll come back to you, and
Okay.
I think you have some more, so.
You're not going to cut me off?
No.
Okay.
So as far as timeline goes, for the carbon filters, we would be looking to do this sometime around like October, just based on kind of the timeline of the administrative record process itself. You know, we have until October 31st to get the comments, then we compile all of those, respond to them, finalize the decision, and then from there we'd pretty much be ready to put the carbon filters in. But as far as the water line, you know, that would probably, you know, take a little bit more time to kind of get off the ground running. You know, carbon filters, you can pretty much have the, you know, installer show up and put them on. And obviously the water line and the hookups is going to be a longer, you know, schedule, so.
First of all, to install the water line, we have a limit of $2 million for interim response. This is an interim response proposed under the HASCA program. So it means that my limit to spend the money is up to $2 million. As Lena has proposed, that cost estimate for water line is about close to $5 million, because rock excavation, pump station, water tank, all this thing has to be included in that cost.
I don't mean to interrupt you. Did you get that number, that $5.5 million from who?
We just calculated based on the linear footage what we calculated
Right.
on the past project, what we are doing in Bucks County, in Norristown Township area. So we just said the bid prices.
But where are you hooking up to?
Pardon me?
Where are you hooking that water up to? Like where are you?
From the Perkasie Borough Authority's existing stub to the area where we sampled and
So
looked
from
at.
Ridge Run over to Tabor Road?
Yeah, I mean,
So, well, part of, like I explained earlier, but maybe it wasn't so clear. So, when we were, you know, looking at the different alternatives, trying to compare them, as I said, there is the risk that if certain, you know, people get hooked up to a public water line and their wells stop pumping, that contamination is then, you know, it's a possibility for it to travel to other areas and contaminate other people's wells. So really, in that case, it's not, you know, necessarily feasible to just hook up, you know, Tabor Road, for example, because then, you know, all of Tabor Road is, you know, they're ceasing to pump their wells. So where's the contamination going to go?
I'm sorry to be a little selfish here, but one of them homes of Tabor Road is mine.
I understand.
That you're sitting here going, well, I'm not just worried about Tabor Road. I'm the one behind Birdie's. I'm not happy about this.
And, you know, this part is part of our, you know,
Yeah, I mean, that's,
we want to get your opinions on.
we
Yeah.
have not made a
This
final
is not-
decision. That's why
right.
all of the information about a new development, if a new water source were to come on, a new water line extension, those are all very critical things that the department needs to know in making a final decision. This is just the estimations that we have. These are the criteria that we use every time we make a decision, so that we're not just going off of, you know, the residents that are here versus residents that aren't. We try to make them consistently, the decisions consistently, and use those criteria. So again, opinions, matters of fact that you know about the area because you live here and you're the experts on your townships and your communities. That's the information that we really are looking for in the comment period.
And to help you out on the cost, first of all, have any of you ever met with the regional authority that we have here? No? So these representatives along this aisle here.
We have run the project in the past with the authorities.
And I'm sure that these folks here would not make sure that number will greatly decrease. They're that good. They're excellent at what they do, and I'm sure for the fact that I mean, it's an expansion for them and so forth, so on. I'm sure that they'll be willing to work with us and work with you to expedite this issue as soon as possible.
Again,
I understand your money. I understand that. I'm just saying, at least let's get some real numbers here. I saw that $5.5 million, and I would be parked on their front step here saying, whoa, 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 because all you're doing is crossing two roads. You're crossing two streets, and you're not tearing the public
I just
right-of-ways
want
up.
to clarify, you know, we're not just going, I don't know if this is easier to see, but, you know, when we were making the estimate, we weren't just,
Man, I'm not criticizing. I'm just trying to help you.
this kind of gives some background of where that number came
Okay,
from.
I'm just trying to
You're
help
only talking
you.
about 2 miles,
Huh?
basically 2 miles.
Yeah, 2 miles.
About 2 miles a run, not even that from
And
the
it's not on a
road.
public road,
Don't
it's
pass the
across
pike,
the
it's only
farm,
about
open
half
field, that events will be.
So you can see, you
2 mile
know,
extension.
Huh? No, I know, but at least it's proposed, and we can work on something to look at, you know? Another question I have, or whatever, so we have a quarry in East Rockhill Township. It has the large sum of water, billions of gallons of water, clean, fresh, beautiful water that's been here for 100 years.
That hole right there.
So the proposal at some day could be 2 years from now, 10 years from now, whenever. If they pump that water out of that quarry hole, what happens to the water table and what happens to the water? Does anyone know?
that's a very valid question, and it's something that we would certainly, you know, look into. So far, I can tell you, you know, the quarry has been sampled. It does not have PFAS at any observable level, and as you said, you know, it has not been drawn down. So what happens if it gets drawn down at a future date?
Oh,
You know, our department is aware that there is the possibility of the quarry possibly being drawn down at a certain point, and that would be, you know, considered if that possibility happens.
What I'm saying is that we now have contaminants. Everybody knows it. We're all worried about where's it going to go next. Is it going to travel and cover all of West Rockhill and East Rockhill? Is it going to go where, you know, where is it going to travel? We don't know. And we're just saying that when the time comes, because the owner of the quarry has told us, it may not be next year, it may be 3 years or 5 years, but they're going to pump that water out of there.
Right.
So all I'm trying to be is being proactive to say, when that time comes, are we going to wait, or can we do something ahead of time before the first pump comes on? You understand my question? I hope you do.
Of course, yeah.
Because it's going to happen. Now, I can't tell you what day it's going to happen, but it will happen.
It's possible, right.
And I'm just saying that we should all be aware of that, and it's a big concern for all residents. That what does that do to the water table? What does it do for? I'm not an expert on water. I just know that water runs downhill.
Well, sometimes.
Unless you have a pump. But I'm saying that we want to be proactive. We don't want to be reactive.
Right.
And that's all I'm bringing this up about, and it's quite an issue there that we
Definitely.
hanging out there. Last question. Being the experts that you are, and I consider you all experts at what you do, and knowing through the learnings from Willow Grove and with other places throughout Pennsylvania, contaminants, no matter what it is, I'm not pointing fingers. I'm not doing that. That's not my job. How bad can this get? Does anybody know? I mean, how bad, you got 12 homes now, can it double in 3 years? Can it triple? Can it cover all of East Rockhill Township? Can it cover all of West Rockhill Township? Does anybody have any idea, or is there a person on your staff, or is there somebody that could tell us the way the contaminants would flow, or how it would go, or is that just a
So,
question thrown up in the air?
so right now, you know, our understanding of that is somewhat limited by the fact that we have only sampled residential wells. And I'm sure many of you can attest that, you know, along the way, the construction, you know, the depth of the well basically gets lost. And we know the depths of some of the wells, we don't know exactly where the water is coming from in the aquifer. There's different, you know, houses right next to each other could have, you know, completely different depths that they're drawing the water from. That is one limitation so far. And the monitoring wells that Ragesh mentioned are going to help us, you know, understand where exactly the plume is and where it may be moving, where it might be able to move in the future. And as Virginia mentioned, this is what we consider, you know, an emerging contaminant in that we're basically learning about how to remediate this, how it moves in the environment, et cetera, along the way. So as Ragesh said, we're going to be, you know, even after the remedy for the drinking water is put into place, we're going to be looking at the groundwater itself, where it may be moving.
Last comment, and I'm done. Thank
That's
for
what
your
you
time.
said last.
I just think that it's very, very critical and very important that your experts get with the local authority as soon as possible. They have the experts that know this ground and the rock formation and the water flow and where it's at. They have every drawing and everything in the world that can tell you in one day you will know where that water flows in that whole entire area.
Not everything.
Okay, Dave, I'm sorry. But anyway, close to it. Close to it, though. I mean, that way you don't have to learn from the ground. You can save a lot of time.
It's a valuable resource.
Yeah, very, very valuable. And that's my only comment.
No, thank you for that.
It would be
Thank you
great.
for everything that you said. Like I said, there's a lot, you said a lot of great things. There are a lot of things in there that are really valuable as comments. So, because you did say a lot, maybe, and I mean that in the best way possible, if you can submit those in writing, all of those points. I mean, you're welcome to get up and make a comment during the formal hearing portion when it's on the record, but to make sure you get everything that you just have said about the development and meeting with the authority and about the quarry, all of those critical points, please make sure that you submit them during the comment period, again, either in a few minutes or before August 31st.
Okay.
And thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for everything that you said.
I have a quick question to follow up on Jim's comments regarding the authority. And I'll save any comments for the issue of the contamination
Could you
when it's on
stand?
the record, because it's wasting a lot of time, in my opinion. But regarding how we got where we are, I'm a relatively new member of the community for 3 years. And as I understand it, and this is where I need a little help, and this is the time to do it because it's not on the contamination. The wells in question were owned by some company, North something?
The North Penn Water Authority,
The
the supply wells.
that. Then evidently, since the discovery of the contamination, it was purchased by the Percy Authority. Can someone explain why we would do that?
Just to clarify, they did not purchase the contaminated wells. I don't,
Oh, I don't
yeah.
Say it again?
Does anyone
Why
know?
don't we let?
I mean, if
Yeah,
anyone wants to.
I'll try to explain it. I'm Dave Watt, I sit on the board.
Could you stand up, please?
I also live in East Rockhill, so it affects me both ways.
Could you stand
The
up?
developer,
that you stand up.
sure. The developer that built the water system sold it or dedicated it to North Penn. North Penn didn't build it, they accepted it. When they found the contaminants, when the federal government lowered the rates, everybody retested their wells, they found the contaminants. Percy Regional Water Authority, which was then Percy Borough Authority, had an interconnect with the two systems just in case there was a fire and they needed more water. It was just good management, it was good business. Once they found this and they had the problem, we were able to supply them with the water at just turning a valve. That's all it was. We already had the draw requirements, our wells outside of the area is good drinking water. Yeah. So when we did that, North Penn and
and Tony from North Penn is sitting here next to me, they shut down their wells, and we ran that system through Percy's water for a year to make sure it worked. Everything worked fine, so we came to an agreement to purchase the system from them so that we could have those 200 customers as new customers to us. Those wells have been shut down, they've been closed off and everything. So hopefully that gives you a little bit better understanding how it works.
Thank you.
More questions? See, I'll come back to you if someone has to ask one. Right here?
Multi-part question and maybe another question. I saw on the slide there's restrictions with public water and or carbon filterization. What were those restrictions?
So just to review, for alternatives 2 or 3, which were the bottled water or the carbon filters, we would be putting environmental covenants on the deeds of those homes. Like I said, this is basically an agreement between DEP and the homeowner to say there is contamination on the well, it is being addressed by this remedy. And it says, you know, in order for the carbon filter, for example, to be an effective remedy, it has to be maintained properly.
Right. So
And
okay, I understand that. So you're proposing the carbon filterization for the homes.
currently, yes.
Yes, currently. And you give a 3 to 5 year filter maintenance situation on the screen, but then you're saying you're only going to cover for 1 year, so that basically could not even cover a filter change.
It depends, like I said, it depends on, you know, how
So
much
where
water
did
they're
you
using.
come up with 1 year?
That's, I don't know, guess you wanna.
The 1 year is based on the interim response requirement under the HASCA law. The state law requires that 1 year.
So the state law is saying 1 year.
Yeah, 1 year and $2 million is my limit.
But when you do the studies, you're doing 3 years.
And the 1 year period, what we gonna do is, we prepare a O&M and operation maintenance manual. So the homeowner would have the idea how to change it, when to change it, etc., etc. And I can pretty much
So
describe
after a
it.
year, he's on his own.
Right.
I would just make the, for anyone in the room who may not know this, DEP does not regulate private wells in any circumstance. It is our standard recommendation that a private well owner sample their own well every 3 to 5 years. And that's to test for anything in your groundwater to make sure that your well has clean drinking water. In this case, where we have found contamination in the area and then have sampled private wells to make sure that the water, to see what's in the water, we are able to do the installation of that system, continue sampling that system for a year, but then the responsibility goes back to the homeowner where it originally lies in the first place.
But a normal water test does not include PFOA and PFOS.
Correct, and Lena's price breakdown was for the tests that do include the PFCs.
Okay.
Again, PFCs are an emerging contaminant, so while we know that they've been used in products, they were not something that anyone was looking for until about 2 years ago. The EPA puts out what's called an uncontaminated monitoring rule list. PFCs were listed in what's called UCMR 3. So every few years the EPA puts out a list of emerging contaminants, either they're new or they're byproducts of other contaminants. There's a reason that EPA puts the list out. We're not privy to why that is on there. But when it comes out, larger systems are required to test, which is what usually triggers some of the smaller systems to voluntarily test their wells, which is what happened in this case. North Penn Water Authority voluntarily sampled because they knew that the larger water systems were already sampling, and when they did that, they found PFCs, which is what led us here today. There is a new list coming out from EPA, which will be called UCMR 4. So there will be a whole list of other contaminants that are on that list. In the past, some of the 1,4-dioxane, which is not in this area, but if you've heard of that, that was on UCMR 2. So this is how we find emerging contaminants and know how to look for them and treat them. It doesn't mean that we know much about them, but we know that that they shouldn't be in the water, and that's where we're at now.
Okay, and the result of the carbonization filter. I think the key word was said there, that so far tests have shown that it's been effective. What kind of testing has been conducted on that can be only said so far?
Well, when we install carbon, the question is how do we know that carbon filters are effective so far? And that when we've installed carbon filters, we take a sample of water before the water goes into the carbon filter and after. And we found that in every case that we've tested that, regardless of what the levels have been, the water that comes out on the other side has been non-detect or almost zero.
I just want to add for NSF certified.
For NSF certified carbon filters. So that's why we're saying, so